Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Nacho Problems, where we turn ordinary recipes into extraordinary nachos. I'm Nacho Queen, but you can call me M. I am super excited about this week's dish. It will be hands down my most versatile recipe yet. This week we are making mac and cheese nachos. But we're not just making any plain old boring mac and cheese nachos. We're going to be making five different varieties of these nachos. Let's get started. Step 1. The chips. The chips are going to be our only common thread for our 5 plates. And this is your warning, I made enough chips for about 10 people, so you'll probably want to adjust your quantities. For my batch, I used 1 16-ounce box of macaroni. I know I have 2 here, only used 1. 1 block of about 7 ounces of Gouda cheese, grated up. Then 2 cups of extra sharp cheddar cheese. You can of course use whatever cheeses you prefer, but I like something with a strong flavor. About 2 cups of flour, divided. 4 tablespoons of butter. About 3 to 4 cups of panko. I actually used 1.5 of these containers. 2 to 3 eggs. About 3.5 cups of milk, also divided. You'll also need 2 baking trays, some foil or plastic wrap, and some heavy cans. Start off by cooking the macaroni according to the package directions. Now, as promised in a previous video, we will be making our own cheese sauce today. To do that, we'll start by melting our 4 tablespoons of butter in a saucepan over medium heat. Then we're going to mix in 4 tablespoons of flour, whisk them together, and cook for a few minutes and until it turns ever so slightly golden. Then add in your 2 cups of milk and continue whisking until it begins to thicken. When it coats the back of a spoon, like this, it's done. Now we'll add in the cheese a handful at a time, stirring well between batches. It might look too thick at first, but trust me, it's going to be perfect. Now here's a little trick. Rather than use a colander to drain your pasta, use a large slotted spoon or one of these spiderweb scoop things to move the pasta directly from the water to your sauce. This retains a little bit of that starchy pasta water that will help the sauce bind to it. Clearly I should have swapped pots here, but once we've got most of our pasta out, we can drain the rest and then move it all back to the larger one. Let's just give that now a good stir, and at this point you can season it, add more cheese, whatever you want. I'm leaving mine just like this since we will be adding flavor later. Okay, now we're going to pour it out onto a foil or plastic wrap lined baking tray. Then smooth it into a nice even layer. Now, as you can see, I've wrapped the bottom of the other tray and we're just going to place it on top. And now we're going to let this cool down for a bit and then place it into the freezer. To be honest, the hardest part of this recipe might have been finding room in my freezer for this pan. Then put some heavy cans on top of it and leave it for at least 2 hours. I actually left it overnight, and if you do that, you might need to pull it out of the freezer and let it sit for a bit to make it easier to cut. Once it's ready to slice, we're just going to be cutting it into nice little 2-inch by 2-inch squares. We're going to get started breading these while we make cameraman cut up the rest using his good knife. Okay, so now set out 3 bowls or containers for our breading stations. Into the first one, add about half a cup of flour. The second, we're going to beat 2 eggs and then mix in about a cup of milk. And in the final one, we're going to add about a cup of panko. First, dip each square into the flour, turning to coat on both sides, then into the egg, and finally into the panko. Now place it on a plate or sheet pan and repeat with all the rest of your chips, topping up your 3 bowls as needed. At this point, you can put them into a bag or container and back into the freezer to save for another day. To cook the chips, we're going to heat up about a 1/4 inch of oil on medium heat and then fry them for about 3 minutes on each side. Be careful while turning them so you don't get splashed with hot oil. Then move them to a paper towel lined pan and keep them warm while you cook the rest. And now it's time to move on. Step 2, the cheese and the toppings. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we are making 5 varieties, one for every taste tester here today. So let's go over each variety and what we need for them. I want an Italian flair to my mac, so I'm using marinara sauce for my cheese and sweet Italian sausage as a topping, and a little parm sprinkled over the top. Young Son thought bacon and ranch sounded good, so he's got ranch dressing in the cheese with sauteed chicken and bacon toppings. Jimmy Buffett's back in town and he's wanting something spicy, so he'll be having buffalo wing sauce with sauteed chicken, and as captain of Team Jalapeno, well, if I don't add them, he certainly will. Cameraman is up next with barbecue sauce for cheese, and although pulled pork sounded good, for simplicity's sake, he's also having sauteed chicken and, of course, bacon. Last but not least, Olson, who didn't know this was a thing but will try anything once, is going to be rocking a lobster mac with a lovely beurre blanc sauce. Now, this is the only sauce I'm making from scratch today, but don't worry, we'll have plenty of chances to try out the others in the future episodes. The beurre blanc sauce requires 1 stick of butter cut into cubes and kept chilled until needed, a 1/4 cup of white wine, 1/8 of a cup of white wine vinegar, and a tablespoon of chopped shallots. Yes, I know these aren't shallots, but the store was out, so we'll make do. So let's cook up our chicken real quick. We're just going to toss it in some olive oil and saute it with a little salt and pepper. Now this is going to be used with 3 of our recipes, so once it's done cooking, we're going to separate it out into portions and then saute each of them in a little bit of their sauces. First up is ranch. Then buffalo wing sauce. And finally the barbecue sauce. Now, you guys have seen me make bacon. It's nothing exciting, and I just threw the sausages in the oven with that. The lobster bites were pre-cooked, so I just sauteed them in some butter real quick, but my camera shut off for some reason, so I missed that. So let's skip ahead to the beurre blanc. We're going to start our sauce by sauteing our onions for just a minute or so, then add in the wine and the vinegar. Bring it to a boil. Keep boiling until almost all of the liquid is gone. Now, if you have a stove like me where it takes forever for the burners to cool, just pull it off the stove entirely and start incorporating the butter a few cubes at a time, stirring constantly. If you get to a point where the butter isn't wanting to melt, pop it back on the still warm burner for about 30 seconds. If you have a gas stove, then just turn your heat down to super low and follow the same steps, keeping this up until all of your butter is incorporated and you have a smooth, thick sauce. At this point, you can strain out the onions if you want, but Olson likes them, so we'll leave them in. Well, that's all for our cheeses and toppings. Now it's time for step 3, or is it 12? Either way, let's eat. As you can see, we've laid out each plate with 3 of our chips. I made enough for everyone to have 5, but that looked like an awfully big serving, so we'll start with 3. First up, we're just going to spoon some of the lobster chunks over the top and add our beurre blanc sauce. Next, we have buffalo chicken. Let's add some extra buffalo sauce. Wow, is that orange? And then top up with jalapenos. Over here on the left, we've got barbecue chicken, extra barbecue sauce, and don't skimp on the bacon. Next is chicken bacon ranch. And finally, we have marinara and Italian sausage topped with a sprinkle of parm. Okay, time to see how everyone likes dinner. Jimmy Buffett says buffalo chicken is a win. Olson and Young Son both couldn't get enough. Cameraman says it needs more bacon, but was otherwise really good. And me, well, I'm exhausted, but this was good stuff and totally worth it. So there you have it, 5 different takes on one awesome recipe. I have no doubt you could think up toppings to make even the pickiest eaters happy. So go take this recipe and make it your own. Well, that's all for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, give it a like and please consider subscribing if you want to see more Nacho videos. If you have an idea for a future video, you can leave a comment below, or better yet, tag me on Twitter. I'm at NachoProblemsYT. And if you need Nacho merch, there's a link in the description. Now it's midterms for me this week, so I'm off to pull an all-night study session, but luckily that's Nacho Problem. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.